Hillary Clinton walked into that hearing room expecting a victory lap, completely unaware that Kash Patel held 5 hidden documents about to shatter her legacy. She had every reason to believe she owned it. She had survived Whitewater, she had survived Benghazi, she had survived the email server, the Foundation investigation, the Steele dossier revelations, and a 7-hour closed-door deposition about a notorious disgraced financier, in which she said never 43 times, and walked out without a scratch. 30 years of investigations, and every single one had ended the same way. No charges, no indictment, nothing. What Hillary Clinton didn't understand, what she couldn't have understood because her entire worldview was built on the assumption that the system would always protect her, was that the man sitting at the witness table had found the room. Not a metaphorical room, a physical room. A room in the basement of the J. Edgar Hoover building that was not on any blueprint, not in any directory, not accessible to any employee. A room that contained burn bags, the large paper sacks used to destroy classified documents that had been filled but never burned. And inside those bags were 5 documents that Hillary Clinton had spent 30 years assuming would never see daylight. Kash Patel found them, and today he was going to read them out loud. Before we get into what happened next, if you want to see powerful people held accountable, hit subscribe. This is just the beginning. The hearing was titled Oversight of the Federal Bureau of Investigation under Director Patel. It was a Thursday morning in late May, and the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room in the Dirksen building was already full 20 minutes before the gavel fell. Every seat in the gallery was taken. The press section was standing room only. 3 overflow rooms had been opened, each with a live feed, and all 3 were at capacity. The hearing had been called by Democrats. The purpose was confrontation. They wanted Patel on the record about the Comey indictment, about the Atlantic article alleging alcohol-related absences, about the leak investigation targeting journalists, about what they called the weaponization of the Bureau under his leadership. They had prepared questions. They had prepared clips. They had prepared righteous indignation in 3-minute increments timed to the cable news cycle, and they had prepared a guest. Hillary Rodham Clinton entered the hearing room at 9:47 a.m. through the main gallery door. She was wearing a sapphire blue pantsuit, the shade she wore to debates, to inaugurations, to every occasion where she wanted the cameras to register confidence and command. Pearl earrings, hair immaculate, the smile, the Clinton smile, the one that had appeared on the cover of every magazine and the front page of every newspaper for 3 decades, was at full wattage. She paused at the door, not to find her seat, she knew exactly where it was. She paused, because pausing at a door is what you do when you want people to see you enter. They saw her. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Camera operators adjusted their angles. A Democratic senator on the dais half stood, leaning forward with an outstretched hand. Clinton walked toward the VIP section, the rows directly behind the witness table reserved for invited guests of committee members, shaking hands as she moved. She touched arms. She nodded. She said something to a young staffer who looked like she might faint from proximity. Clinton sat in the center of the VIP row, not off to the side, not in the back. Center, visible from every camera angle in the room, directly behind the witness table where Kash Patel was already seated. Her presence was the message. Democrats had invited the woman whose career Patel had spent a decade investigating. The woman whose campaign funded the dossier Patel had exposed. The woman whose emails Patel had been trying to declassify since 2017. She was there to be a symbol of persecution, of weaponization, of the FBI being used as a political tool against its enemies. She crossed her legs, adjusted her jacket, folded her hands in her lap. The classic Clinton pose, relaxed, open, nothing to hide. She looked to the gallery above like a woman who had come to watch a play she had already seen the ending to. She had been investigated more than any person in modern American political history, and every investigation had ended the same way. This one would be different. 15 minutes before the hearing began, Clinton had stood on the Capitol steps and delivered her verdict to a wall of cameras and microphones. "What's happening inside that building today is exactly what I warned about," she said. "A man with no prosecutorial judgment and a grudge against anyone who ever investigated Donald Trump is now running the most powerful law enforcement agency in the world." She paused. The practiced pause of a woman who had given 10,000 press conferences and knew exactly how long to hold a moment. Kash Patel wasn't qualified to run a field office. He's certainly not qualified to run the FBI. He was a congressional staffer who got promoted for loyalty, not competence, and now he's using the Bureau to settle scores. Another pause. The smile dimmed, not to sadness, but to the particular shade of wounded dignity that Clinton had perfected over 30 years. I've been investigated more than any person in modern American political history, and every single investigation, everyone, ended the same way. No charges, no indictment, nothing, because there was nothing to find. She looked directly into the nearest camera. Mr. Patel has spent his career looking for something that doesn't exist. And when you can find what you're looking for, you invent it. That's what we were seeing today. Inside the hearing room, Patel sat at the witness table. He had watched Clinton's press conference on a tablet handed to him by a staff member. He watched the whole thing. When it was done, he set the tablet face down on the table and adjusted a manila envelope that had been sitting beside his prepared testimony since he arrived. The envelope was old, not new for the hearing. Old, genuinely old, creased, stained at one corner, and across the front in black marker, in handwriting that was not Patel's, someone had written 3 words, "Durham, do not destroy." Kash Patel did not look like a man who was about to dismantle 30 years of political invincibility. He looked like a man who had prepared for a hearing and was waiting for it to start. He sat at the witness table in a dark gray suit, white shirt, no tie, the no tie that had become his signature since taking over the Bureau, the visual signal that he was not Washington, had never been Washington, and did not intend to become Washington. His hands were folded on the table in front of him. His expression was neutral, not friendly, not hostile, the expression of a man who processes information before he produces reaction. Patel's career was written in the trajectory from that table to this moment. Public defender in Florida for 8 years. Major violent crimes, illicit smuggling, financial crimes. The kind of cases where your clients are guilty and your job is to make sure the system treats them fairly anyway. Then the Department of Justice terrorism prosecution under Obama, not under Trump, a fact that his critics never mentioned because it complicated their narrative. Then the House Intelligence Committee, where he became Devin Nunes' chief investigator and did the thing that changed everything. He read the FISA applications. He read them line by line, the way a public defender reads a charging document, looking for what was missing, what was omitted, what was presented as fact but wasn't, and he found it. The Clinton campaign's funding of the Steele dossier hidden from the FISA court, the unverified allegations presented as corroborated intelligence, the 17 errors and omissions that Inspector General Horowitz would later confirm. For finding those things, the Department of Justice secretly obtained his personal email and phone records using grand jury subpoenas. For finding those things, cable news called him a conspiracy theorist for 3 years, until every conspiracy he identified was confirmed by Mueller, Durham, and Horowitz. And now he sat at the witness table in the building where his career had been built and nearly destroyed, with the woman whose campaign had funded the operation that targeted him sitting 12 feet behind his left shoulder. The chairman gave the hearing to order. Director Patel, thank you for appearing before the committee. We have many questions about the Bureau's recent actions. But before we begin our questioning, you indicated in your written submission that you wish to make an opening statement. You have 15 minutes. Patel leaned forward, adjusted his microphone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have an opening statement, but before I deliver it, I want to acknowledge someone in the room. He turned his chair, not partially, fully. He rotated in his seat until he was facing, not the committee, but the gallery, specifically the VIP row, specifically one person. Madam Secretary, Patel said. Welcome. Clinton's smile held, the perfect smile, the smile that had survived everything. You said something on the Capitol steps this morning that I want to address, Patel continued. You said I've spent my career looking for something that doesn't exist. He picked up the manila envelope, the one with the black marker. He held it so the cameras could see the handwriting. It exists, Madam Secretary. I found it, and it was in a room that someone tried very hard to make sure I would never see. He turned back to the committee. Mr. Chairman, my opening statement concerns 5 documents. I found them in a room at the J. Edgar Hoover building that was not on the building's blueprints. The room was locked. It was not in any internal directory. No employee had listed access. Inside that room were burn bags, containers used for the destruction of classified materials. The bags had been filled. They had never been burned. He opened the envelope. Someone put these documents in bags meant to destroy them. Someone locked the door. Someone erased the room from the building S map. And someone, I don't know who, wrote on this envelope, "Durham, do not destroy." He looked at the committee. Someone wanted them burned, and someone else wanted them found. Today, the American people get to decide which person was right. Document 1. Patel removed a set of stapled pages from the envelope. The pages were slightly yellowed, not from the hearing, not a fresh printout. These were old documents, documents that had been sitting in a bag in a room in a basement for years. This is an internal FBI memorandum dated November 3, 2016, 4 days before the presidential election. It was sent from the FBI's New York field office to the office of then Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. The subject line is, "Request for Authorization, Cross-Reference of Wiener Device Materials with Clinton Foundation Case Files." The hearing room was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes when people realize they are hearing something for the first time. The memo states that materials recovered from the Anthony Weiner laptop include approximately 340,000 emails. Of those, an estimated 2,800 contain classified markings. Additionally, and this is the part that matters, 47 emails contain references to Clinton Foundation donors, foreign government officials, and financial transactions that, in the judgment of the New York field office, warranted cross-referencing with existing Foundation investigation case files. Patel looked up. The agents in New York found something. They found 47 emails that connected to an ongoing investigation of the Clinton Foundation. They wrote a memo. They sent it to headquarters. They asked for authorization to share the materials with the Foundation investigative team. He set the memo on the table. The authorization was never granted. The Foundation team never received the laptop materials. Deputy Director McCabe's office, the same office whose occupant's wife, received $675,000 from a Clinton-aligned PAC during her Virginia State Senate campaign, received this memo and did nothing. This memo was in the burn bag room. Mr. Chairman, the agent's request was not just denied. It was erased. He turned slightly toward the gallery. "Madam Secretary, you said this morning that every investigation ended with nothing to find. But the agents who were investigating found something. They documented it. They asked permission, and someone buried it. Not in a filing cabinet, not in an archive, in a bag meant to be burned." In the VIP row, Clinton's smile was still there, but it had changed, not disappeared, frozen. The muscles holding it in place had locked, and the expression that resulted was not warmth, but rigidity. The difference between a woman who is smiling and a woman whose face is stuck in the shape of a smile. Her eyes, which had been scanning the room with the practiced ease of a woman who had spent 30 years being watched, stopped scanning. They fixed on a point above Patel's head at the wood paneling behind the dais. The gaze of someone who is looking at nothing in order to avoid looking at something specific. She leaned toward her attorney. The first lean of the hearing. The lean was casual, practiced. The lean of a woman who has sat through 1,000 hearings and knows how to make a whispered conversation look like small talk. But the attorney wasn't doing small talk. His pen was already on his legal pad, and he was writing before she finished leaning. Document 2. Patel removed a second document from the envelope. This one was different. It had been inside a smaller sealed envelope, which Patel opened carefully, like a man handling evidence, because it was evidence. This document was classified by the CIA. It was inside the burn bag room in a sealed sub-envelope. The exterior of the sub-envelope bears the handwriting I've already shown you, Durham. Do not destroy. Someone at the bureau placed it in the burn bag. Someone else, possibly the same person who wrote on the outer envelope, marked it for preservation. He held up the document. It was printed on standard government paper with classification markings visible at the top and bottom of each page. This is a financial trace. It maps the full payment chain for the Steele dossier, the document that formed the basis for the FISA warrant used to conduct electronic surveillance on an American citizen associated with the Trump campaign. Patel read slowly, deliberately, the reading speed of a man who wants every word to land. The payment chain begins with the Clinton campaign, $1.02 million to the law firm Perkins Coie. We knew this. It's been in the public record since 2017. Perkins Coy to Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS to Christopher Steele, the former British intelligence officer who authored the Dossier. We knew this too. He paused. What we didn't know, what was classified by CIA and has never been released, is line 4. The hearing room went still, not quiet, still. The difference between an absence of sound and an absence of movement. Line 4 shows a payment from Fusion GPS to a company called Baltic International Consulting, registered in Prague, Czech Republic, $47,500, wired March 2016. Czech financial intelligence records shared with the CIA through a bilateral intelligence sharing agreement identified the beneficial owner of Baltic International Consulting as a business associate of Igor Danchenko. Patel looked up from the document. Igor Danchenko, the primary subsource for the Steele dossier. The man whose fabrications, whose lies, became the factual basis for a FISA warrant used to spy on an American citizen. The man Special Counsel John Durham indicted for making false statements to the FBI. He turned toward the gallery, toward Clinton. Madam Secretary, your campaign didn't just hire the man who wrote the dossier. Your campaign's money, laundered through a law firm, through an opposition research firm, through a shell company in the Czech Republic, reached the man who fabricated the intelligence inside it. Your money funded the lie, and the lie was used to obtain a warrant, and the warrant was used to spy on your political opponent. That financial trace was classified. It was hidden, and it was in the room. In the VIP row, Clinton's hands moved. The movement was small but unmistakable. Her right hand, which had been resting on her lap in the classic relaxed Clinton pose, slid to the armrest of her chair, gripped it, the knuckles whitened. Her left hand rose to her throat and touched her pearl necklace, a gesture that anyone who had watched Hillary Clinton in depositions over 30 years would recognize. The self-soothing touch, the fingers finding the smooth surface of the pearl, holding it, releasing it, finding it again. She had done this in the Benghazi hearing. She had done this in the email server press conference. She had done this in the previous high-profile deposition, but this time the gesture was faster, more urgent. Touch, release, touch, release, touch. The rhythm of a woman whose body is processing information that her face has not yet been given permission to display. Her attorney leaned in. Clinton whispered back, her hand covering her mouth. Not the casual cover of a woman sharing a comment about the proceedings. The urgent, deliberate cover of a woman saying something she absolutely could not allow the cameras to see. The attorney pulled out his phone. His thumb moved across the screen. A text, an email, a call, something that required immediate external contact. Document 3. Patel's voice had not changed. Not louder, not softer, not angrier, not more dramatic. The same flat, methodical register he had used since the first document. The voice of a man reading evidence into a record, not performing for an audience. This was the thing that made Patel different from every other political combatant in Washington. He didn't perform. He read. He presented. He let the documents do the work. This is a forensic analysis report produced by the FBI's Operational Technology Division, the technical team responsible for the actual examination of Madam Secretary's private email server. The report is dated September 2016. He held up the document. It was thick, 20 or 30 pages, dense with technical language. This report was not included in Director Comey's July 5, 2016 public statement. It was not included in the FBI's referral to the Department of Justice. It was not provided to any congressional committee. It was in the burn bag room. Patel opened the report to a tabbed page. The report confirms what Director Comey told the public. FBI technicians recovered 14,900 emails from the server using forensic recovery tools. Of those, the report identifies 193 containing information classified at the confidential level, 67 at the secret level, and 22 at the top secret, SAP level. He paused on the acronym. SAP, Special Access Programs. The highest classification the United States government maintains. Information so sensitive that access is restricted even within the intelligence community. Information that, if disclosed, can compromise intelligence sources and methods and endanger the lives of human beings who work for the United States in hostile environments. He turned to a specific page. But the public report isn't why this document was in the burn bag room. Page 14 is why it was in the burn bag room. He read page 14, which was not in the version Director Comey used for his public statement. It states, "Forensic analysis of the data deletion pattern indicates that the wiping was selective, not comprehensive. Certain email chains were targeted for deletion, while adjacent chains in the same folder structure were left intact. This pattern is inconsistent with a bulk deletion of personal emails and is consistent with a targeted removal of specific content." Patel set the report on the table gently. Selective, targeted, not yoga and wedding planning, not Chelsea's bridesmaid emails. Targeted deletion of specific email chains. Someone sat at that server and chose which emails to destroy. And the FBI's own technicians, the people who actually examined the physical server with forensic tools, documented the pattern. Director Comey told the American people there was no evidence of intent. His own technical team documented selective targeting, and the documentation was put in a burn bag. Madam Secretary, this was in the room. Clinton's breathing changed. It was visible from the gallery, the slight rise of the shoulders that comes with a deeper than normal inhale, the expansion of the chest that the body produces when it needs more oxygen than normal. Because the cardiovascular system is responding to a threat the conscious mind hasn't fully processed, she adjusted her jacket, pulling it tighter, straightening the lapels, a movement that looked like grooming but was actually armor. Then she crossed her arms. It was the first closed posture she had adopted since entering the room 10 minutes earlier. She had been open, legs crossed, arm on the armrest, chin up. The body language of a woman at a charity gala. Now she was folded in, arms across her chest, shoulders drawn forward, the body closing itself before the mind gave permission. Her attorney passed a note on paper this time, not whispered. Clinton read it. Her jaw tightened, the masseter muscles visibly flexing beneath the skin. She wrote something back. The attorney read her response and shook his head. A small shake, not dramatic but definitive. Whatever Clinton had suggested, the answer was no. Clinton wrote again, pressed the pen harder, the indentation visible from 2 seats away. The attorney read it, shook his head again. The exchange was visible to the gallery, visible to the cameras. The first public evidence that Hillary Clinton and her attorney were disagreeing openly on paper in real time about what to do. She wanted to do something. He was telling her she couldn't. Document 4. Patel removed a single page, not a thick report, not a multi-page memo, a single sheet of paper dense with text bearing the seal of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. This is a classified communication from the presiding judge of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to the Attorney General of the United States. It is dated February 2018. It has never been released. It was in the burn bag room. The mention of the FISA court changed the temperature in the room. The FISA court is the most secretive judicial body in the United States. It operates behind closed doors. Its proceedings are classified. Its judges rarely make public statements, and its internal communications with the executive branch are among the most closely guarded documents in the federal government. A FISA court letter being read aloud in a Senate hearing room was by itself unprecedented. The letter states, and I want to be precise because some of the underlying intelligence remains classified, and I am reading only the portions that have been approved for disclosure by the Director of National Intelligence. He read, "The court has reviewed the renewal applications for electronic surveillance of the individual identified in the original application and has identified material omissions that in the court's judgment would have been dispositive had they been disclosed at the time of the original application." Patel looked up. Dispositive. In legal terms, Mr. Chairman, that means if the court had known, it would have denied the warrant. He continued reading. The court specifically notes the omission of the political origins of the primary source material, the failure to disclose exculpatory information regarding the target, and the inclusion of unverified allegations presented as corroborated intelligence. The court has referred this matter to the appropriate Inspector General for investigation. Patel set the letter on the table. The FISA court, the most secretive court in America, a court that approves more than 99% of applications, a court that almost never criticizes the FBI publicly or privately, wrote to the Attorney General and said, "If you had told us the truth, we would have said no." He turned toward the gallery. And what was the truth they didn't tell? That the dossier was paid for by the Clinton campaign. that the subsource whose fabrications formed the basis of the application was connected to a payment from the campaign's own money chain, that the entire factual foundation of the warrant was political opposition research presented as intelligence. Madam Secretary, your campaign paid for a dossier. That dossier was used to obtain a warrant to spy on an American citizen. The court that approved the warrant says it would have denied it, and the letter documenting that, the court's own words in the court's own voice, was in the burn bag room. Clinton's attorney stood up. The movement was sudden and visible. A man rising from a gallery seat in the middle of a Senate hearing is a physical disruption that every camera in the room registers. He was on his feet before he seemed to have decided to be on his feet, the involuntary standing of a lawyer whose instinct is screaming that the situation has crossed a line that requires action. He leaned down, whispered urgently, his mouth close to Clinton's ear. The whisper was not brief. It was sustained. A paragraph of urgent legal advice compressed into 15 seconds of rapid speech. Clinton shook her head. The famous headshake, sharp, definitive, the movement that cable news had captured 1,000 times in 1,000 contexts. But this time it meant something specific. The attorney was saying we should leave. Clinton was saying no, she would not leave. She would not give them the clip. She would not be the woman who walked out of a hearing room with cameras capturing the back of her blue suit retreating toward the exit. 30 years of instinct said, "Stay. Stay. And survive. You have always survived." But 30 seconds later, something changed. Her arms uncrossed, her hands moved to the armrests, her weight shifted forward. The subtle redistribution of mass that precedes standing. The body preparing to lift itself before the mind gives the final command. She was going to stand. She was going to walk out. She was going to do the thing she had told her attorney she would not do because the calculation had changed. Because document 4 was worse than documents 1 through 3, and document 5, whatever document 5 was, might be worse than all of them. She started to rise, and Patel, without turning around, without looking at her, without any indication that he knew what was happening 12 feet behind his left shoulder, said, "Madam Secretary, I have one more document." Clinton froze, half standing, neither in the chair nor out of it. Her hands on the armrests, her weight between sitting and standing, her body caught in the exact midpoint between staying and leaving, the most powerful woman in American political history, suspended in the posture of indecision with every camera in the hearing room capturing the moment. Her attorney's hand found her arm, the gentlest possible touch, a fingertip pressure on her forearm just below the elbow. The touch that says, "Sit down. You've been seen. Sit down." She sat. Not because she chose to stay, because she had been caught standing, and sitting back down was the only movement that didn't make the clip worse. Final document. Patel's voice was different now, not louder, quieter. The shift was subtle but audible. The way a room gets colder before a storm. He had been reading documents in the flat, methodical register of an investigator, entering evidence into a record. Now his voice carried something else, not emotion. Wait, this document is not from the burn bag room. It was provided to the FBI last month by the House Oversight Committee as part of their ongoing investigation into a notorious, disgraced financier. The reference changed the air, not the temperature, the chemistry. That name in a hearing room in Washington in 2026 did to an audience what a gunshot does to a flock of birds. Every head moved at once. It is a page from your daily schedule. As Secretary of State, Madam Secretary, the schedules were obtained by the Oversight Committee through a subpoena to the State Department's Office of the Historian. Patel held up the page, a single sheet, typed, official State Department formatting, with the daily entries laid out in the block format used for senior officials' calendars. The date is June 4, 2011. He read the entry. 7:00 p.m. Dinner, private residence, New York. The address listed is 9 East 71st Street. He set the page on the table slowly. 9 East 71st Street, New York, New York, is the address of that disgraced financier's Manhattan townhouse. The hearing room didn't react. There was no gasp, no murmur. There was nothing. The absolute silence of a room full of people who have simultaneously stopped breathing. You testified under oath to the House Oversight Committee on February 26, 2026. You testified for 7 hours. During that testimony you stated, And I'm reading from the official transcript. I never met him. I never had any connection or communication with him. You said you never flew on his plane. You said you never visited his island, homes, or offices. Patel looked at the gallery. Your own State Department schedule has you at a private dinner at his home address. He paused. The pause was not theatrical. It was necessary. He was giving the room time to process what he had just said, the way an EMT gives a patient time to breathe between compressions. I want to be fair, Madam Secretary. It's possible there is an explanation. It's possible the address was entered incorrectly by a scheduling assistant. It's possible the dinner was at an adjacent property and the wrong address was logged. It's possible. He stopped. But it's also possible that you testified under oath for 7 hours that you never visited his home, and your own calendar in your own State Department record says you did. And when the Oversight Committee first asked you to testify in October 2025, you said you had a funeral. When they rescheduled for December, you said you had a funeral. When they subpoenaed you in January, you didn't show up at all. And when they threatened contempt, bipartisan contempt, Madam Secretary, Republicans and Democrats, you finally sat down for 7 hours and said, never. Clinton was no longer performing. The mask, the Clinton mask, 30 years in the making, tested by Whitewater and Benghazi and the email server and the foundation and the dossier and every investigation that had ever aimed its machinery at her, the mask was off. Her arms hung at her sides. Her hands resting on her thighs were trembling. Not the dramatic tremor of a performer, but the fine, involuntary vibration that comes from sustained adrenaline, the body's chemical response to a threat that cannot be fought or fled. Her face had changed color, not pale but gray, the particular grayness that comes when blood retreats from the skin's surface to the body's core because the cardiovascular system has shifted into survival mode and there is nowhere to survive to. When Patel read 9 East 71st Street, Hillary Clinton did something she had never done in 30 years of public life. She looked down. Not at a note. Not at a phone. Not at a document. Not at anything. She looked at the floor, at the carpet, at the narrow space between her shoes. The gaze of a person who is no longer looking at something but away from everything, the involuntary aversion of the eyes that the body produces when the mind encounters information it cannot process and cannot reject. Her attorney sitting beside her had stopped trying. His hands were flat on his knees. His legal pad was closed. His phone was in his pocket. He stared forward at the back of the seat in front of him with the expression of a man who has run out of options and is waiting for the event to end, the way a passenger waits for a turbulent flight to land, not with the belief that he can affect the outcome, but with the hope that it will eventually be over. So I'm asking, Madam Secretary, Patel said. His voice was barely above conversational. Were you at 9 East 71st Street on June 4, 2011? The room waited. Clinton's mouth opened. The reflex. The 30-year reflex. The reflex that had answered every question in every deposition and every hearing and every press conference and every debate. The reflex that said, deny, deflect, pivot, reframe, survive. The reflex fired, her lips parted, her jaw moved, but no sound came out. Not because she chose silence, because for the first time in her public life, the reflex to speak and the knowledge of what speaking would cost arrived at the same instant, and they canceled each other out. Anything she said, any word, any syllable, any sound in a room full of cameras about that address on her calendar would become the only clip anyone played for the rest of her life. She closed her mouth, looked down again at the floor, at her shoes, at the space between her feet, where there was nothing to see, and nothing to answer, and nothing to survive. The woman who had coined, "What difference at this point does it make?" had no answer. And the difference at this point was everything. Patel turned back to the committee. Mr. Chairman, I was asked to come here today to answer questions about my leadership of the FBI. I'm happy to do that. I'll answer every question this committee has, but I want the committee to understand something first. He placed his hand on the 5 documents now stacked on the table. When I arrived at the FBI in February 2025, I found a physical room in the J. Edgar Hoover building that was not on the blueprints. It was locked. It had no listed access. It was not in any internal directory. Inside that room were burn bags, Containers designed for the destruction of classified materials. The bags had been filled. They were never burned. He paused. Inside those bags I found these 5 documents. A memo from the New York field office requesting to share laptop evidence with the Clinton Foundation investigative team, denied by FBI leadership and erased. A financial trace showing the Steele dossier payment chain reaching the man who fabricated its intelligence, classified by CIA and hidden. A forensic analysis proving the email deletions were selective, not random, suppressed from Director Comey's public statement. A letter from the FISA court saying the surveillance warrant would have been denied if the truth had been disclosed, buried. And a State Department calendar entry that contradicts sworn testimony. He held up the envelope. The black marker "Durham, do not destroy." These documents were not hidden by junior employees. They were not misplaced by mistake. They were hidden by leadership, by the people who were supposed to ensure accountability, who were supposed to follow the evidence wherever it led, who took an oath to uphold the law regardless of who the subject was. The people Madam Secretary described on the Capitol steps this morning as having investigated her and found nothing. He set the envelope on the table. They found something. They documented it. And someone put it in a bag to be burned. Patel looked at the gallery one final time. "Madam Secretary, you said I've spent my career looking for something that doesn't exist." He gestured to the 5 documents on the table. "It exists. I found it. It was in the room." He straightened his posture, adjusted his microphone. "And the room is empty now, because everything that was in it, every document, every memo, every forensic report, every classified letter that someone decided the American people should never see, is now in the hands of the United States Senate, the Department of Justice, and the American people. The burn bags are open, Madam Secretary." He folded his hands on the table, the same position he had started in, the same neutral expression, the same flat, methodical calm. "And there's nothing left to burn." In the VIP row, Clinton's attorney stood. This time, Clinton did not argue, did not shake her head, did not write a note or whisper an objection. She stood, and the movement was slow. Not the deliberate slowness of dignity, the mechanical slowness of depletion, the movement of a body operating on the residual energy left after sustained adrenaline has burned through everything else. She walked toward the exit, not the walk of the entrance 90 minutes earlier. She had entered this room like a queen, pausing at the door, shaking hands, touching arms, smiling at staffers, sitting center. That woman was gone. The woman walking toward the exit held her purse in both hands in front of her body, a shield. Her arms were pressed to her sides. Her head was level, but her eyes were unfocused. The gaze of a person walking a hallway she cannot see, because her vision has narrowed to the exit sign at the end of it. No one in the gallery touched her. No one stopped her. Democratic senators who had shaken her hand 90 minutes ago, who had stood to greet her, who had leaned forward with outstretched arms, who had wanted the cameras to see them welcoming her, looked at their papers as she passed. Every one of them, papers they had already read, papers they would not remember reading. But the papers were somewhere to look that wasn't at the woman walking past their chairs. She reached the door. Her attorney opened it, a small act of physical management that was also an act of mercy, because opening a door requires looking up, and Clinton was not looking up. And just before she stepped through, a camera, a single pool camera positioned at the side of the room for wide-angle gallery shots, captured her face in profile. The image would be published within the hour and reproduced 10 million times by midnight. It showed a face that was not angry, not defiant, not composed, not performing. It showed fear, not political fear, the fear of bad polling or a lost election or a negative news cycle. Animal fear, the biological fear response that the human face produces when the prefrontal cortex has exhausted its ability to suppress the amygdala's signal. And the body's oldest system, the one that existed before language, before politics, before law, takes over and broadcasts the single message: it knows danger. She walked through the door. The attorney followed. The door closed behind them with the soft pneumatic hiss that all government doors make, a sound designed to be inaudible but which in the silence of the hearing room was the loudest thing anyone had heard all morning. The hearing continued. The chairman cleared his throat. A senator asked a question about the FBI's budget. Patel answered. The machinery of government resumed its turning, but Clinton's chair was empty, and the 5 documents were on the table, and the envelope, "Durham, do not destroy," sat beside them like a headstone. The clip of Clinton, half standing, frozen between sitting and leaving, caught by the cameras in the posture of a woman who could neither stay nor go, was posted to social media at 11:23 a.m. Eastern. By noon, the freeze was the #1 trending topic in the United States. By 2:00 p.m., the image had been screenshotted, memed, captioned, and shared more times than any political image since the photograph of Pelosi pointing at Trump across the cabinet room table. The second clip, Clinton looking at the floor after 9 East 71st Street, was slower to spread but ultimately more devastating because it was harder to explain. The freeze could be spun as she was adjusting her position or she was reaching for her purse. The floor gaze had no spin. It was the face of a woman who had heard something that she could not deny and could not answer, and the face told the story that words never would. Clinton did not appear before cameras after the hearing. Her spokesperson released a statement at 4:00 p.m. The director's performance today was a political stunt designed to distract from the real issues facing this country. The documents he referenced are being reviewed by our legal team. The statement was 3 sentences long. It did not address the foundation memo. It did not address the dossier payment chain. It did not address page 14. It did not address the FISA court letter. It did not address 9 East 71st Street. The statement did not deny 9 East 71st Street. Within 48 hours, the DOJ's Public Integrity Section announced a formal review of newly surfaced documents from the FBI's archive, with specific reference to the forensic deletion analysis and the FISA court letter. The House Oversight Committee announced it had subpoenaed Clinton's complete State Department daily calendars for the period 2009 through 2013. Previously, only partial records had been available. Clinton's attorney filed an emergency motion to seal the calendar entries from public disclosure. The motion was denied within 24 hours. By the end of the first week, a special counsel had been appointed to investigate whether Clinton committed perjury during her February 2026 closed-door deposition, specifically regarding her testimony that she had never visited those homes. Clinton canceled all scheduled public appearances. A source close to the family told Politico she was consulting with legal counsel on multiple fronts. 3 days later, Bill Clinton retained independent counsel, a different attorney from Hillary's. In Washington, the separation of legal teams within a marriage is a signal with only one interpretation: their interests were no longer aligned. By the end of the second week, the Clinton Foundation announced a temporary pause on new grant disbursements pending organizational review. 3 board members resigned. A federal grand jury was convened in the Eastern District of New York. Scope undisclosed but reported by the Wall Street Journal to cover financial records, foundation correspondence, and scheduling documents from Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State. Patel, for his part, answered the committee's questions for another 3 hours after Clinton left the room. He addressed the Comey indictment. He addressed the Atlantic article. He addressed the leak investigation. He was methodical, precise, and unhurried. The same tone, the same register, the same flat affect that had characterized his reading of the 5 documents. When a Democratic senator accused him of turning this hearing into a political spectacle, Patel adjusted his microphone and said, "Senator, I read 5 documents. I didn't write any of them. The FBI's New York field office wrote the foundation memo. The CIA compiled the financial trace. The FBI's Operational Technology Division produced the forensic analysis. The FISA court wrote the letter, and the State Department produced the schedule. I just found them in a room that someone tried to erase from the building." He paused. If reading the government's own documents into the congressional record is a spectacle, then the spectacle was created by the people who hid them, not by the man who found them. In Quantico, Virginia, in the common room of the FBI Academy's dormitory building, 43 trainees watched the hearing on a wall-mounted television that was usually tuned to ESPN. Sarah Chen sat in the second row. She was 27 years old, second week at the academy. She had joined the FBI because of 3 words on a wall: fidelity, bravery, and because of something her father said to her when she was 11 years old, standing in line at the immigration office in Flushing, Queens, holding a number and waiting for their number to be called. Her father had come from Fujian province with $400 and a phrase book. He opened a dry cleaning business on Roosevelt Avenue. He paid his taxes in cash at a walk-in H&R Block office because he didn't trust the mail. He became a citizen in 2009, and on the day he took the oath, he cried, the only time Sarah had ever seen him cry. And when she asked him why, he said, because in America, nobody is above the law. She was 11. She didn't understand what he meant. She thought he was talking about traffic lights. She understood now. She watched Patel read from the burn bag documents. She watched the foundation memo. Agents asked for permission. Permission was denied. The memo was burned. She watched the financial trace, money flowing through shell companies to reach the man who manufactured a lie that was used to spy on an American citizen. She watched page 14, selective deletion documented by technicians, hidden from the public. She watched the FISA court letter, dispositive, and she watched Clinton. She watched the smile freeze. She watched the hands grip the armrest. She watched the breathing change. She watched the half-standing freeze, the image that would define the hearing. The image of the most powerful woman in American political history, caught between staying and fleeing, unable to do either. When Clinton looked at the floor after 9 East 71st Street, someone in the common room whispered, "She's done." Sarah didn't whisper anything. She looked at the bureau seal on the wall above the television. Fidelity, bravery, integrity. 3 words that had been on that wall since the academy was built. 3 words that someone at the Hoover Building had put in a bag to be burned. The room is empty now, she said quietly, to no one. But she meant it. The room was empty. The documents were out. The burn bags were open. And the 3 words on the wall were not just words anymore. They were a promise that someone had tried to break and someone else had kept. She was here to make sure they stayed on the wall. She was here because her father cried in a government office in Queens, and after all the burn bags and the secret rooms and the erased blueprints, it looked like he might have been right. Carter Page turned on the television at 10:00 a.m. because he always turned on the television at 10:00 a.m. And he always regretted it, and he always did it again the next day. He lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Arlington, Virginia. The apartment was small and clean and contained almost nothing personal. No photographs on the walls, no diplomas, no memorabilia from the career in international business that had ended when the FBI obtained a warrant to monitor his communications based on a dossier, funded by a presidential campaign, and fabricated by a man who had never met him. He watched hearings on mute with the captions on. He had learned to do this after 2017, when the sound of his own name on cable news began to produce a physiological response, a tightening in the chest, a quickening of the heart rate, a sensation that his doctor called anxiety, and that his body called the memory of being publicly accused of acting as a state enemy by people who knew it wasn't true and said it anyway. The captions were easier, words on a screen. He could control the speed at which he processed them. He could look away. He didn't look away today. Patel read the FISA court letter. The captions rendered the words in white text on a black bar at the bottom of the screen 2 seconds behind the audio. The slight delay creating a strange effect where he could see Patel's mouth moving before he could read what Patel was saying. The word appeared on the screen, dispositive. Carter Page closed his eyes. He thought about October 2016. The call from a Wall Street Journal reporter at 7:30 on a Tuesday morning. "Mr. Page, are you aware that the FBI has obtained a FISA warrant to monitor your communications?" He thought about the year that followed. The friends who stopped calling, not because they believed he was a foreign agent, but because being associated with someone who was publicly accused of being a foreign agent was itself a form of contamination, and people have families and careers and reputations of their own to protect. The job offer from an energy consulting firm that was extended on a Monday and rescinded on a Wednesday with no explanation except a voicemail that said, "We've decided to go in a different direction." The woman he had been seeing for 4 months who texted him, texted not called, that she couldn't be associated with someone under investigation and wished him well. He thought about his mother calling him on a Saturday afternoon crying because a former CIA analyst had appeared on national news and used his name and the word traitor in the same sentence. And his mother, who had come to this country from Ohio, not from Moscow, who had taught elementary school for 30 years, who did not understand what FISA stood for or what Crossfire Hurricane meant. His mother had heard a man on television call her son a state enemy and had believed for 20 minutes before Carter called her back that it might be true. Dispositive. The FISA court's own word written in a letter hidden in a burn bag found in a room read aloud by the director of the FBI in a Senate hearing room on national television. If they had known the dossier was paid for by the Clinton campaign, they would have denied the warrant that started everything, the warrant that ended his career, the warrant that cost him his friends, his job, his relationship, and 20 minutes of his mother's peace. Dispositive. It should never have happened. He opened his eyes. On the muted television, Clinton was looking at the floor. The captions read, "Were you at 9 East 71st Street on June 4, 2011? Carter Page didn't feel satisfaction. He didn't feel vindication. He felt the tiredness that comes after years of carrying something heavy and the particular emptiness that comes when the weight is finally set down and you realize that your arms still ache and your back still hurts and the damage was done before the relief arrived." One word, dispositive. It doesn't unring the phone call from his mother. It doesn't uncancel the job. It doesn't unend the text from the woman who couldn't be associated with someone under investigation. It doesn't give back the 4 years, but it says something. One word from the most secretive court in America written in a letter that someone tried to burn and someone else saved. The word that means it should never have happened. Carter Page turned off the television, walked to the window, looked out at Arlington, the apartment buildings, the traffic, the ordinary morning of an ordinary city where ordinary people go to ordinary jobs without ever wondering whether their government is listening to their phone calls because of a lie that someone else paid for. The room was empty. The burn bags were open. The word had been said. It should never have happened. But now, everyone knew. The hearing continued for 3 more hours. The senators asked their questions. The director gave his answers. The cameras recorded everything. But the story, the real story, had already been told. Not by a politician, not by a pundit, not by a cable news anchor. By 5 documents that someone tried to destroy and someone else wrote, "Do not destroy" on the envelope. The room is empty now, and there's nothing left to burn.